A new report out of Forbes says the two greatest theme parks in the Disney catalog might have had a $16 billion loss. Let's talk about OLC and Tokyo Disneyland here on That Park Place. Hello, I am Jonas J. Campbell, an investigative reporter for That Park Place, and here with me is Mr. VashSky. Vash, are you ready to talk about the greatest theme park in the entire world?
I am always ready to talk about the greatest theme park in the entire world. Tokyo Disney? Come on, there's stories there for days, but this one, very intriguing.
That's right. Well, let's go over to the land where fantasy springs eternal here. Disney theme park complex that has lost 16 billion of its value this year. This by Caroline Reid out of Forbes, one of the best investigative reporters out there that covers Disney. For the past 3 years, Disney's theme parks have cast a powerful spell on its bottom line. As the pandemic receded, guests streamed through their turnstiles flush with furlough cash and a pent-up demand to travel. Many of the Disney resorts hit new highs, but one was not so lucky. Few countries suffered from the pandemic as long as Japan. Its location on an island initially protected it, but tourism nosedived as most of the world couldn't travel there during lockdowns. As countries started emerging from the pandemic, COVID-19 reached Japan's shores. The tourism industry had tried to attract foreign travelers again after the dial had been reset. As they say, the bigger they are, the harder they fall. So it's perhaps no surprise that one of the most badly bruised businesses was Tokyo Disney Resort, Japan's most visited theme park complex. The nearly 500-acre site on the outskirts of Tokyo is the only Disney-branded resort in the world which isn't owned or operated by the Walt Disney Company. Instead, it's run by the Oriental Land Company, a specialist leisure venue operator listed on Japan's Nikkei Stock Exchange. There are so many important details here. There's obviously a historic contract between the Walt Disney Company and the Oriental Land Company, a company that, by the way, the Oriental Land Company has done a fantastic job, and they've had to prove that year after year that they would do a better job with this. And they have standards that even Disney doesn't meet in their own theme parks. They have a full license, meaning they do their own thing over there, and that they have to use Walt Disney Imagineering in order to enact whatever it is they enact over there. And they're actually willing to put money into their theme parks. And so you get better attractions over there more often. They're a little bit more tested before they go over there because the Oriental Land Company is much more careful with their money. And of course, they also have Tokyo Disney Sea, which when we say the greatest theme park in the world, it's legendary, that Tokyo Disney Sea. Vash, you have anything you want to add before we continue on?
It is absolutely legendary. The OLC, or the Oriental Land Company, has really taken on the values of, I would say, like a 1970s version of Disney, and as that's kind of remained its culture there in Tokyo. Very unique, very distinct from any location on the planet bearing the Disney name. That is absolutely for sure. It's very surprising to learn, though, that it isn't all sunshine and rainbows over there, and really kind of speaks to the different business that OLC is in, as opposed to maybe the domestic parks owned and operated under Disney.
That's a very good point. And speaking of dark skies, the pandemic blew dark clouds over Tokyo Disney as shows were canceled, park hours reduced, daily attendance limits introduced, and restaurants even cut their menus. In order to keep guest numbers down and minimize mass gatherings, annual passes and multi-day tickets were withdrawn, and the dark skies still have not cleared. By the way, if you're interested in this story, you need to go check out Caroline Reid's other work here. She's following the numbers there. They still haven't gotten up to the numbers that they had pre-pandemic here in the post-pandemic world. They're almost there if you're being very optimistic about it, but they are not quite there. Getting to the parks isn't child's play either, as although a monorail pulls up at the gates, it isn't free like it is at Disney World or Disneyland in California. Riders need to buy a ticket, and if you don't have a Japanese credit card, you need to use cash. Digital infrastructure at Tokyo is also weaker than its counterparts elsewhere in the world, as Wi-Fi is only available in certain parts of the parks. Oh, that actually sounds fantastic. They clearly aren't aimed at international guests, as staff speak very little English, and in line with Japanese tastes, many of the rides are much more tame than their equivalents stateside. The Tower of Terror freefall ride even has over-the-shoulder seatbelts rather than lap restraints, as there are in the U.S. That actually sounds a little nicer there, although obviously Tower of Terror Awesome. Wouldn't want to change that.
I do absolutely agree. Yeah, there are some definite differences when it comes to the operation of the Tokyo parks. Obviously, you have maybe a populace that is a little bit more reserved. So I know I've heard in the past that getting cast members to be outgoing or expressive has been kind of a thing. That is for sure. But yes, it can't be understated. The pandemic really rocked Tokyo, and in a very, very bad way. I believe they were limited to, I think, like 5,000 a day. I'm trying to find out whether or not that's the entire resort or whether that was just per park. But I mean, 5,000 a day, you can't even keep the lights on with that capacity restriction. There's just no way.
That's basically maintaining operations in order to say that you are maintaining operations, not lose training, exactly. Not lose guests entirely. That's you may even be operating at a loss in that, just so that you can ramp it back up. Now, there have been amazing efforts out there at Tokyo Disneyland. Let's talk about that. Last month, Disney Sea opened Fantasy Springs, a new land containing a 470-room deluxe hotel, gift shop, 3 restaurants, 4 new attractions themed to Disney's hit animated movies Frozen, Peter Pan, and Tangled. Look at that right there. You think you own whatever land you land on, and then you look right there. It's Pocahontas' face that's on it. I guess she owns it herself at a cost of 2.1 billion. That's 320 billion. That's in yen. That's an amount that we're very familiar with because of our other stories on OLC right now. It isn't just the most expensive expansion to Tokyo Disney in its 41-year history, but one of the most costly ever added to a Disney park. I would say to any theme park, most likely. Although it has a blockbuster cost, Fantasy Springs looks cartoony and seems incongruous in the realistic setting of Disney Sea, which hasn't escaped the attention of some fans, as we've reported. Vash, what have you been seeing out of Disney Sea and Fantasy Springs?
I think a lot of people have, generally speaking, they really have loved the addition of Fantasy Springs. I have heard that complaint, though, that, yeah, Disney Springs, I'm sorry, not Disney Springs, Tokyo Disney Sea took on a very a realistic approach to the world, into various settings and so forth. And yes, this is a very cartoony or fanciful take, maybe something that would have been more properly suited for the castle park next door. I will say, though, that there is a barrier that kind of that isolates this from Disney Sea proper. So I think some of those thematic things, I think you can let those slide.
Yep.
The hotel, though, the exterior, I've heard some bad complaints on that, but the attractions themselves, nothing but rave reviews.
Oh, well, as long as the boats are staying afloat there. Now, the thing that you are here for is obviously to hear about the $16 billion loss, and let's get into that. Thanks in part to the pricey single-day tickets, OLC forecasts that revenue will rise 10% to a record $4.3 billion this year, operating income increasing to an all-time high of $1 billion, even though attendance is expected to be 11% down on its peak of 32.6 million in 2019. Again, as Forbes revealed, stock chart shows that OLC's market capitalization, the total value of its shares, peaked this year at 62.7 billion in January, but has fallen by a staggering $16 billion since the beginning of the year. It isn't due to an overall decline in the market. This is clear from the fact that the performance of OLC stocks stands in stark contrast to the Nikkei 225 Domestic Exposure 50 Index, which it is a component of. As the chart shows below, the value of the index has surged around 15% over the same time frame that the OLC has crashed 19% under Chief Executive Yumiko Takano. Now, Vash, we've covered, obviously, and I referenced the 330 billion yen that was spent, or is going to be spent on the new OLC cruise ship. Do you think that this is in direct response to a chart like this?
I do believe they did do a deal like that with the understanding that Oriental Land Company's current holdings and business ventures aren't necessarily doing that well. They have to diversify. This is why, historically, by the way, the Oriental Land Company executives have been unbelievably conservative when it comes to investment into their parks. Like, literally, WDI has to really, really, really wow them until they say, okay, we're going to go ahead and do this. Because these investments are not surefire bets. These things, you know, depending on the investments that are actually made and people's reception to them, and obviously factors regarding the country, you know, you can lose your hat on some of these things.
Yeah, and that's a very good point. Now, there is an overall question here if the Disney brand globally is affected here and whether or not there's a diminishment of the Disney brand altogether. I don't know how Japanese tastes relate to American Western sensibilities and maybe progressive Western sensibilities. I'm not going to use the word that is often used for that, but it does. It is a four-letter word that starts with a W. Now, over there, they're not going to see the results of Fantasy Springs in their financials until October of this year. I don't know if they'll have a $16 billion, not yen, jump in their valuation once that happens here. I don't know how the Nikkei index responds to theme parks. The U.S. side over the NASDAQ and the New York Stock Exchange do not respond that well to theme park news, as is evident from the fact that Epic Universe is about to open up. Everyone seems to be excited about that, but it doesn't have much effect on the pricing of Comcast stock. I don't know, Vash. What do you think is the issue here, and how can the OLC, which is a very restrained company, fix an issue like this?
The Disney brand might have something to do with it, but I think the larger issue is going to be travel and, necessarily disposable income from Japanese tourists who want to necessarily visit a place like Tokyo Disneyland and Tokyo Disney Seas. I think the investments, I think they were well placed. I think they have new attractions that people are actually going to go to Tokyo to actually see. So that's good. But I think the market might be looking at it and going, I don't know if that luxury or that tourist or a trip spending is necessarily going to play out. And so when I see OLC making a move like cruise lines have been going up, whereas theme parks, and we're experiencing this in the States as well. Cedar Fair and United and Six Flags, at least before that merger, they weren't doing all that well in the stock price either. That's one of the reasons why they merged. So I think OLC going to cruise lines, that I think it's an attempt to try to turn things around, because I think the market is like, I don't know about this theme park business.
Yep, I think you're absolutely correct there. But we want to throw this to our commenters down below. What do you think about this situation? By the way, are you planning to go to Fantasy Springs sometime in the future over there at Disney Sea? I've always wanted to make that pilgrimage myself. Like this video, of course, if you like this video or if you find it helpful. And consider subscribing to That Park Place for all the news that should be fun.
Thanks for watching That Park Place News. For more information, consider checking out www.thatparkplace.com. And don't forget to subscribe, share, like, and send this out on your favorite social media accounts.